Welcome to today's How to Lift Off an Agile Teams webinar session, which is powered by Agile Crew. My name is Jessica Crowley. I'm an enterprise Agile coach and Agile trainer, and I have a background that's rich in the private sector, and I have, in the last couple of years, worked a lot in the government sector and recently expanded into the nonprofit sector. So I work with a lot of companies starting their Agile transformations, working with their initial teams, as well as coaching their leadership team. And I am a business owner of a company called Epically Agile LLC. So I subcontract. You may see on my LinkedIn feed some work that I'm doing for Radically Better Agile. That's mostly in the government sector. You may also see some work I'm doing for Agile nonprofits. That's work I'm doing in the nonprofit sector. And then there's some work I'm doing privately in the private sector. So an interesting thing about my journey is that I have a very close, dear business partner. Her name is Denise Jervy, and she also has her own consulting company. And the two of us were like, how can we collaborate and remain unique and have our brands be separate while also getting the mutual benefit of working together? And so we founded this idea of the Agile Crew, which has really started to take off in our network. And the idea behind the Agile Crew is that we really want, if we're going to work together on a contract, we really want to work with like-minded people who are as passionate and as driven as we are. And what we found is that business owners are the most passionate people that we know. They have a lot of skin in the game. They want to be successful. And we have a large network of Agile trainers and Agile coaches that we've gotten the privilege over the years of coaching and training with. And so they've really earned our respect. However, it's really difficult in this consulting world to work together, because basically what usually happens is you have to leave your brand and subcontract under the name of another Agile company. And also what happens is there tends to be a lot of price gouging. So there's individuals who will give you work, but they're making a lot of money off of your work. And so we wanted to find a way that we could be mutually profitable, that we would be enticed to give each other work, and that we could represent each other under a unified brand while being separate entities. And that's where Agile Crew came about. So I'm very excited to announce that we will be doing regular webinars that will be hosted by different members of the Agile Crew. Right now, this is the starting companies that have come together and had teaming agreements signed. So now that you know what Agile Crew is and you know a little bit more about me, I'm so excited to talk to you today about how you can start and sustain launching your Agile teams. And to do that, there's 4 sections to this webinar. The first part is I want to help you understand what agility is, in case I have some newbies here who've never even heard of what Agile is. This will not be a Agile Principles, Agile Manifesto review. No, this is going to be something much more inspirational about more of the why behind it. And then we're going to talk about designing a successful team liftoff. So how can you set your teams up for success? What types of teams should you choose? What characteristics are represented in a great Agile team? And then finally, I'll open up for Q&A. Please feel free, though, I do look at the chat while I'm talking. So if there is something really important or a question or an angle you'd like me to drive at, we can get there together. So I want to talk about understanding agility. As a webinar attendee, I want to understand what agility is so I can positively influence the environment in which my teams will operate. That's our desired learning from this. So I'm sure you've heard of the cone of uncertainty. And really the idea behind the cone of uncertainty is that when we start a project, we really don't know as well as we do at the end of the project how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. As we kind of unravel the ball of string, we uncover a lot of the risks and the unknowns. And so a big reason why the world around us is moving towards agility is because we understand that we live in a VUCA world. And if you haven't heard what VUCA means, that acronym, it stands for a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world where we're bombarded by technology that's constantly changing. We're bombarded by information, the wealth of information that we're expected to stay on top of and be responsive to. and also the world of the fact that there's so much competition for our talent. Think about all the people that migrate from one company to various other opportunities. So the reason why companies are reconfiguring the way that they approach work is because we're starting to understand more that what we know in the beginning of any endeavor we take on, that's true across all angles of your life, is not going to be what you know when you start to get halfway through that journey. And so we have these three things. We have the what we know in the beginning, which is usually some small subset of the whole picture. What we know we don't know. So we're often able to identify that in the form of our risks and risk management approaches. But then there's the whole world of what we don't know, right? No one knew that COVID-19 was going to hit in early January and February of this year. If we had, we would have all been very set up very differently at home, right? How many of us were scrambling to try to get our, chairs and our office equipment and even your gym equipment? We didn't know what we didn't know. And that's the facts now, that the world is going to be like this forever because change is happening so rapidly. Change used to take a long time to happen. And now because of the age of the internet, the rise of the internet, the amount of information we're exposed to and the rapid technology advancements, we are going to be faced with a completely different environment tomorrow than we are today. Waterfall development is something that I actually specialized in at one point, and there are several books on this bookshelf over here as I got my PMP and learned a lot about earned value. And the thing about Waterfall is that you plan in advance, you set this goal. And remember that circle and those subsets of circles, we know only a tiny bit about what's going to happen. And then we know there's a bunch of things that we don't know anything about. And we set this goal from that day one about where we want to end up at the end of that project. And what typically happens is we maybe even plan for an imperfect world. We design, we develop, we integrate, we test, and we find a lot of bugs and issues and surprises that end up helping us, or well, not helping us, meet our business goals or our user needs. So it's really difficult in the beginning of a program to nail down a plan that's something that's achievable. And I believe if I were to reach out to the audience and ask you, have you ever been on a program that's been perfectly executed? The answer will be no. And we often take this baseline plan and we measure our success against that plan, when the truth is that a scientific and experimental approach would be much more appropriate based on the fact that we don't know very much in the beginning. So I'm going to take you back to like 8th grade in some of the topic areas here. Agile is shifting that paradigm. So Agile says there is a goal that we want to meet. There's this high level goal that we want to meet. What can we do to incrementally experiment on the entire system? So how can I make something that's at a system level that has some subset of the functionality and the features that I'd like to have in that final product or service? And how can I get testing that idea out faster so that I can eliminate risk? And what this results in is something I can demonstrate to my customer that's valuable to them. And they can look at it and give me some feedback about what they do or don't like about that product. And internally, I can identify bugs, flaws in my designs, and expose some of those larger circle unknowns, the unknown unknowns, right? The things we don't really know about. By doing this, we're actually continuously validating our hypothesis along the way. Our hypothesis at the beginning was that we could arrive at some goal in X amount of time and at X amount of cost. And by doing this iterative approach, we're exposing the flaws early on. The customer likes this because they get incremental value. Instead of just having a percent complete on a program, I get a percent complete, and I also have seen and touched a product, or I have experienced some subset of a service. And customers are really happy because their opinion and the way that you collaborate with them is much more inclusive. So they feel vested in the product that's being developed. So this is kind of an eye chart, I know, but the bottom two things are the topics we just talked about. So we just talked about going from a faith-driven waterfall approach to an agile value-driven approach. And on the top, is the shift that happens in the way that we think and the way that we work together. So the employee experience, we want employees to basically be like an entrepreneur, to be autonomous, to be focused on continuously improving. There's a reason why we started Agile Crew, and the reason was because we found that just getting an employee who goes and trains and coaches for you is a very possible thing. There's a whole world of that right now. But are there people who are representing a brand and are creating their own content and their own innovative thoughts? If there are in that mindset, then they're going to be much more likely to do a great job and have a resounding reputation. So we want our employees at work to be focused on continuously improving the way they work and the way they develop their products. We want them to collaborate and create, and we want them to have a common understanding. We also want to take on that, go back to 8th grade in science class, that evidence-based hypothesis thinking. So instead of planning for a magical, if everything went well, how much will this cost and how long will this take? We really want to get to the point where we have hypothesis. So we believe this new product will solve X problem, and we're going to incrementally slice that out just like we did in science class and test it, create 3D print our concepts, model, get any type of feedback we can and experiment and validate our hypothesis. And our goal with that is that we can have a much richer product. So here are the 4 things that are crucial for setting up a brand new team that is agile. 1, you have to have an environment that will accept iterative design over big design up front. And I get into a lot of discussion with this. This is a complex conversation. I could literally have a whole hour webinar just on the thing on the left. But what we have done for a very long time is big design up front, where we harden a complex design. And what we should be doing is providing just enough requirements and architecture up front for that design and modularizing that design so that we can work on a module, test a module, and understand the interfaces between the module without designing a complex system in absolute detail. And the reason for that is, like we said, there's a lot of unknown unknowns. So if you have a lot of unknown unknowns and you haven't set yourself up to be flexible, then your costs when you change something late in the design cycle are going to be much higher. The second part, experimentation over elaborate planning. So we want to have a plan, a high level plan, but we want it to be a plan that's based on all of these little mini hypothesis and testing cycles. And in that way, we'll be able to collect data about how our product performs, how our service performs, and we can make strategic decisions to pivot where appropriate. This actually makes the best use of your money, and it makes you more lean and efficient in how you're operating. Therefore, your profit is going to increase. Customer feedback over intuition. So we really, instead of just determining what we think that customer wants, we want to show them products. We want to show them service with the idea that they will give us their feedback and we don't have to guess. Whenever we can take away the guessing, we reach a state of clarity that you just can't get through a proxy or through other means. The 4th part, collaborative work over one hero. So instead of building an environment where we have subject matter experts that we're completely dependent on, we have to find a way, if there really is a war over talent and our talents being kind of snatched with better opportunity, we have to find a way to integrate a base level of knowledge on our tools and our systems so that if we lose someone, we're not completely in a state of disparity, right? So the best way to do that is to set ourselves up with small teams who are transferring knowledge, not that each one can do each other's job, but with that military mindset that all soldiers have a base level of medical skills. They can save a buddy's life, they can fire a weapon, they can use a communication system. We want to have base skills that our whole company is very well versed in, and that will allow us to collaborate better, to have less handoffs, and to just be way more focused and have a lot more redundancy, which gets rid of those bottlenecks. So the 2 ways of working where we're really starting to dissect the differences here, it's not just about the large planning and the big design up front. It's not just those things. What it also is you might have in that waterfall approach, you may have experts. They're doing all their work, right? They're focused on themselves. So in this diagram, we see the business analysis, the architect, the interactive design, graphic design, and development. So we have experts that are handing off their work, and they typically don't look back until there's problems, right? And then when problems come up, then they might pull together in a tiger team and try to figure it out. So the problem with this is just like when you send someone an email and it takes them 6 weeks to get back to you, there's delays between every single handoff. In fact, studies have shown the more complex your company is with the more roles, the more likely you are to have less communication saturation and more delays, resulting in more costs for your project and more time to execute them. With an agile approach, our goal is actually to have these cross-functional teams where they work together on a daily basis. And we would really like to drive towards this icon on the right, that's the T-shaped people. We want people to have expertise. We know that people went to college because they had a passion for a particular area within their field. But we also know that we believe the why approach to our team members, that they are intelligent, motivated individuals, and that they can learn more about how their role impacts other roles. And in doing so, they're going to come up with creative ways to work better together. The third part about this diagram that I really like is the idea of failing faster. So fail fast so you can succeed sooner. That's a great thing because you will inevitably encounter bugs. You will inevitably have to fix things. You will have things go wrong in your supply chain. You'll have long lead parts that you didn't plan on. There's all kinds of mayhem that happens in a program over the life of a program. The longer and bigger your program, the more likely that that is. So if we can start experimenting through some of our hypotheses faster, we can get rid of some of the nonsense that would be plaguing us at a systems integration level later on in our program. And then the last part of this diagram that I like is that 50% of knowledge gets lost to handovers. So the more handovers you have, that person is looking backwards to try to figure out, okay, what did this person do? So that I can review what they've given me and determine my course of action. So you're actually losing a lot of the knowledge you would normally have if you had a cross-functional team that was working together to solve problems. At agility, this is a great diagram to show you how to start moving towards agility as an organization. Agile is a mindset. So it's the way in which you think about work, and it's the way in which you approach your work. So that mindset that you have can be a personal thing. It doesn't have to be a whole organization to be agile. You can be a person and be agile. Values, that's really your compass. So how you become agile is looking at the values that you have and the principles that lead you towards agility, but actually taking that knowledge, that head knowledge, and turning it into active actions in the form of practices is where you really become agile. And then last but not least, you can buy tools, you can send your teams to training, you can do all of that, and they're still not going to be agile if the people within your organization are not open to the mindset. So when you look at this, you're actually going to go from the inside out, and the things that are less visible in a corporation, like the mindset, the values, the principles, those are the most powerful ways in which you can move towards agility. You can be agile and just be using sticky notes. You don't have to have complex tools. You can be very agile and not even be part of a team. So there's a lot here that you can approach agility in a flexible way. Here's a typical journey. So you start out on the bottom with a willingness to improve. So you have some type of state in which you think that there's a better state you can arrive at, and you're willing to improve. So you understand and evaluate, maybe even measure your current state of agility. Then you make sure that everyone's on the same page. Do we interpret our current state the same way? And we establish a shared vision. So where should we be going with our agile journey? And that will help us get people motivated to want to change. And that may involve actually forming teams. So when you form an agile team, what you're doing is giving a team permission to focus and to collaborate together. And you're going to shift their skills so that they become more T-shaped and they can, swarm and pair and create cool product together. And their goal when you establish a team is to deliver value to the customer, to the organization. And now the focus will be that team will tell you, oh, I have impediments. I can't be successful by myself without some type of help. So they're going to give you impediments. And then your goal is going to be to shift your organization, to expand the way that they work, to optimize the way that they work. And you take all of the things that you learn from your initial Agile team and you adapt when you launch additional teams. So this is a great formula for how you can get going with an Agile transformation in your company. Here's the thing. A lot of companies, they're trying to sell you giant frameworks. That's not the goal here. What you should be focused on is starting small. So I'm going to zoom in on this one if I can here. You want to start small. You want to scale what works. So when you start small, you're going to find things you like and things you don't like. Think about this as a giant scientific experiment. You're going to take the best things that worked, and then that's what you worry about creating more of, and let it emerge out naturally. There are a lot of different frameworks. There are a lot of ways that you can layer on process and support your teams, and you very well will need that at one point. But just know that the best way to start is actually with 1 or 2 teams and getting it right and fostering it. And I'll teach you how to do that in this next section. So I hope you enjoyed that first section. The second session is, as a webinar attendee, I want to learn best practices for new Agile team launches so I can set my teams up for success from the beginning. So there's a few things that I want to talk to you about that you need to have as ingredients for your teams to be successful. So first, an Agile team needs clear leadership in the form of vision and purpose. They also need data. So teams need data. If they're going to be scientific and approach things hypothetically, they need data to help them make good decisions. They need Agile roles. So there will be to some extent, a shift in what their focus is, and that depends on what type of Agile approach we'll talk about, which type of teams. They also need permission to be customer centric. So they need access to the customer. They need the ability to collaborate more with the customer. And finally, they need 2 things, which we'll talk about in great detail later: alignment, so alignment around that goal and purpose, and autonomy, the freedom to execute their work. This book is an amazing book. If you have a chance to read it, I highly recommend it. It's called Liftoff. And what I like about this is it's talking about every team needs a great start, and that the best way to start out is to create positive force that's going to help move the team towards having successful delivery, and rinse and repeat. So everyone comes together in a liftoff. They establish a product vision, they collaborate together, they come up with a mission, they team build. And this is the best way to create energy, a buzz about, an excitement about Agile and this new approach. And it's also a way to unify just from the get-go. It's better to have a good start than it is to have a rough and bumpy one. It's really hard to recover that once you've gone about it the wrong way. So here's an important one, and this is from me, as walking through an Agile transformation myself in a company. I'm very passionate about this point. I think that teams should be allowed to opt in or opt out. So I don't think that saying to a team, go forth and deliver with Agile, is the best approach. I think that a better approach would be to maybe survey who is flexible and open to trying something new, because you are setting yourself up for a world of misery if you create Agile teams that have not opted in, because they will resist you. You're asking them to do something fundamentally different. And as we discussed, that giant circle of Agile mindset, that's really where you get the most momentum towards being Agile. So if people aren't willing to try something new, they're not a good candidate for you to start out with an Agile team. The 3 things you'll need to work on in order to have a very smooth Agile liftoff meeting and get that energy is you'll need purpose. So you're going to want to have a crisp vision. You're going to want to help the team have very clear missions and ways to measure success. So when we talk about mission tests, we're talking about ways to measure success. Alignment. So you want to establish a team. You want to make sure that they have had a chance to work out working agreements, because they're going to have differences in the styles in which they work. Their expertise will be different, and having simple rules that the team has created themselves allows them to gel and move through the steps of forming, norming, forming, storming, all those things. And then the context. So every team is going to have a unique context. They may be exposed to the same environment, but they may not have the same stakeholders. They may not have the same resources. They need to understand these three things if they're going to be successful. And this involves leadership. All these three things actually have a lot to do with leadership and the facilitation of a good team launch. So to create a good vision, most of you, if you have any type of exposure to Agile, have seen something like this. Vision for a product or service needs to be established before you are, launching a team. This is like their compass. So there's an overall product or service that you're creating, and it's identifying who is your customer, what do they need, what's the product going to be called, where does it fit in the market, why does someone want to buy it, what makes it unique, what is it that makes it different than all the other products that are out on the market. What we're trying to do is identify the business value that we are driving towards. So maybe it's that we want to decrease the time to market. Maybe it's that we want strategic flexibility, the ability to make changes late in the cycle. Maybe it's that we want higher quality solutions or increased employee engagement or loyalty. It's important to understand the business value associated with that product, because that's something that, if we believe in the Y versus the X type of employee, that's something that actually gives them a focal point. Oh, what I'm doing creates value for my company because it gives us heightened customer loyalty, or because it decreases time to market. And once they have that why, they're going to be much more motivated with what they're doing. Vision. So the vision, in this diagram I have, we need to cross the river, you can figure out how. So in this case, they're saying what needs to be done, but they're not telling the employee how to do it. And that gives a lot of flexibility for creative solutions, innovation. You need a strategy, of course, right? There's got to be, if you have a vision, you also need a strategy for how you might execute that. And so what we like to do is have a stable team that has a mission, and their mission is to create some sub-product, some part of that product, or provide some type of service, maybe inside the organization or outside of the organization. And you use the data that comes from that team to determine your strategy for how you're going to obtain that overall vision. So these are all things where leadership's playing a very strong role in setting that team up for success. I want you to understand that there are many different types of teams, and that Agile can work for many different types of teams. So here are four. I wouldn't say this is exclusive. I would say that this is just a great representation of the diversity of an Agile team. So on the left, we have a customer journey team. They deliver strategies. It's connected to the customer's journey, such as maybe getting new customers. So let's think of like a cable company. Maybe they want to arrive at more customers, and so they're going to interact with that customer on their journey. So how do you get someone to subscribe to more cable TV? Or maybe it's about getting increased usage, so AT&T or something like that. So customer journey teams, they interact heavily with the customer, and their goal is in some cases to sell or upsell the customer with a product or a service. Then you have product teams. Those are probably the ones we're most familiar with. So there's some type of strategy in place. They need to create X amount of product by a certain release date, and they work together pretty stably to provide high quality, fast delivered product. Platform teams are different. So their goal is to deliver functionality in the platform to support needs of the customer journey and the product teams. So this could be an established platform, and they're releasing new functionality in there that either enables internally the teams to work better together, or externally it's something for the customer. So think of maybe like Tesla or Apple. Then you have support teams. So support teams can be a lot of variety here. So you can have support teams in the form of like IT support, but you could also have an Agile coaching support team where they look at the needs of all the different teams, and their backlog or their work items are driven by those teams. So training, mentoring, it could be DevOps, design ops, people ops, HR. This is a great way. Those are all support teams that support the organization. So before you launch a team, you should identify what's the product or service that we're creating. So what's that overall vision, and what types of teams will we need in order to fulfill that vision. So this involves some mapping out and thinking about this as a leader. Then you're going to go dive in just a step deeper. So maybe you now know what types of teams that you need, but what skills will you need on that team to help the teams accomplish their mission or their vision? So this is where you'll need to map out all the skills in your organization. So from maybe operations, analysis, user experience, design, development, online marketing, product owners, scrum masters, coaches. This could be an exhaustive list of all the skill sets that you need. And you're going to look at these skill sets and determine which ones are needed for each one of the teams. And this helps you identify the people that you're going to end up forming together on your initial team. We want to have cross-functional teams. So when we talk about that, I've had people say, well, Jess, are you telling me that I want, electrical engineer to become a software engineer? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying what you should do is when you start to put together the people that will be on the team, you should assess what expertise do they have. So catalog all the different skill sets you have in your organization, and then survey each person and find out which one of these things are they really good at. So in this case, we have green, yellow, red. So red is a beginner. They don't know very much about the topic at all. Yellow means I could make it work. It might take me a lot longer than someone who's really good at it. And green is an expert. And then how passionate they are about those things. So maybe they really like it, maybe it's okay, maybe they hate it. By measuring this, now you can determine what skills are needed and what skills you have, and look at the gap. And that gap will be your focus, because you'll want to train them, cross-train them, maybe hire. You have to make some strategic decisions when you determine how T-shaped the people are on the team. And when we look at the T, you'll notice there's like all these little notches going on there. It's not really a clean T. And that's because what you'll find is most people don't just have one expertise. Most people have at least a little experience in tools or other concepts, and maybe even in other fields. And so once you identify that, you can start to make the most out of that experience. And maybe you're not optimizing for that right now. And what we're trying to do is, by T-shaping, we're minimizing a common anti-pattern that happens all the time in the workforce, and that's the mini waterfall. So you can have a cross-functional team hanging out together, and each person is still doing their own thing and handing it off because they have no context for what the other individuals on the team are doing. So we want to make sure that we get to this collaborative state. So I haven't said anything yet about deciding what types of teams. So this is where we're going to have a little bit of zooming in happening. So let's start with Scrum. No, I'm not going to teach you everything that Scrum is, but I'm going to talk about how it's different maybe than other frameworks. So Scrum is a framework. It actually layers on structure to the Agile principles and the Agile value, so that you have a known cadence and some predictability. So in Scrum, you use cycles or time boxes of 1 to 4 weeks, and planning usually occurs at the beginning of a sprint. So you have a high level plan, and then you have your little plans for what are the things what are our hypothesis, what are we gonna build, what are we gonna test, and what are we gonna demonstrate to our customer. And even at the very beginning of a project, when you're using Scrum, you do estimation. So your whole backlog, all the things the teams are going to work on, are all estimated. So the entire project or product is fully estimated at any given point in time. It's just that you might have giant chunks of work, like years worth of work or months worth of work, that are estimated, and they need to be broken down over time, just enough, just in time. When the teams get ready to go into a sprint, they have to have ready backlogs, so small little pieces of work that have been split into a format where you can do it in 1 to 4 weeks. During a sprint, you're not allowed to change the work that's in the sprint backlog. So any work that comes from the outside should wait for the next sprint. Now, of course, in a perfect world, that would be great. Sometimes they do actually have interruptions. So generally, they reserve some subset of their capacity for interruptions. There's 3 roles on a Scrum team. There's the product owner, the Scrum master, and the team members, and that's it. And each one has a different functionality. I won't get into that too much. There's 5 events or meetings that happen inside of a sprint. So there's the sprint itself, which is 1 to 4 weeks. There's sprint planning, where they make a plan and they set a goal and they work to meet that goal. There's the daily Scrum, where they talk to each other every day about what they did since they last met to accomplish the sprint goal, what they will do to accomplish the sprint goal, and any impediments to that. And then they have a sprint review. So how did this go? Let's look at the product. What did we actually develop? What is our testing and our hypothesis shown us? What does the data say? And then finally a retrospective. So great, we finished a sprint. How do we do it better? How do we get faster? How can we be happier doing all of these things? And so that's the continuous improvement part of it. The product owner is responsible for the backlog and for value. So there is somebody that owns the value and the final outcome, and that's the product owner. So when to use it? So when to use it is when you have this giant, massive thing that you don't know a lot about. Like in this example, we might have a boulder and we break it down into rocks, into smaller pieces that we know more about, and eventually we get to a state where it's pebbles. So you need to have small items, small value. You want to have it where it's incremental, things you can work on and kind of evolve over time. You need a roadmap or a big picture that tells you where are you going, where are your releases, where are your interactions with that customer going to be. And it's also really useful when you have some dependent teams. Like there's overlapping responsibilities, and there's going to be maybe different modules that need to be integrated into a system. Some of the ways you know that a team is doing Scrum is you'll see a product backlog, and the team pulls from that product backlog, which is a list of all the items the team has to do to build the product. They pull it into a sprint backlog, which is, okay, we can do this much at work. We're going to take this much work from the backlog, commit to it, work it through our process, and they usually use a Scrum board to do that. So that basically shows what they plan to do and committed to do, where those things are in their workflow, and what's been accomplished. And then they also make their work very visible in the form of like a burn down chart that shows how likely they are to accomplish all of the things that they've committed to. So that's different than Kanban. And sometimes the board that the Scrum teams are using gets confused with the framework Kanban. Kanban is actually another framework. And really what it is you have a pile of work, and a pile of work is in your Kanban backlog. There's no prescriptive planning routine. So typically this is a pull system. So if you have a pile of work, you're going to pull something from that pile of work on it, drive it to done. Then you worry about planning for the next thing that you're going to pull from the work. And we call this pull. You're focused on flow. Kanban is all about flow. So how do we take something from an idea to completing it and shipping it, flowing it through all of our process? How can we optimize that? Get rid of waste, get rid of handoffs. So you're trying to constantly improve the way that you work through your process. The estimates of time typically happen with Kanban by the fact that each ticket is actually tracked. So you see how long it takes to do it. And by that average in Little's Law, which says that you can average those items together, and that will pretty much give you a good sense of how long it's going to take. So when you pull things to done, you can estimate what it's going to take to do all the things that are sitting in their backlog based on their average ticket time. And the thing about that is it may vary based on the type of tickets, like bugs may have a different ticket time than a regular Kanban card. And the team will pull things from the backlog and implement it. They change the work scope as they need it. So meetings are very flexible with Kanban. It's just like you normally would work. So if I would normally work by myself and decide when I need to go to a meeting or what I'm supposed to do, it's the same thing. So you don't have a product owner or a Scrum Master or a team member. You are just yourself and maybe some other people on your team working through your existing process and trying to improve it. So meetings, there's none required, but they are going to happen. It's just that they're not like in a set cadence. And ownership depends on the defined roles and the necessities. So there is a little bit more like who owns this? Technically, everyone owns it. And then here's some reasons why. teams are set up to be Kanban teams. If you're in this explosive rate of constant change, so it's very difficult maybe to make those sprint long 1 to 4 week commitments. Maybe there's support or a maintenance team, or maybe they're focused on fixing bugs. Kanban teams are amazing teams. They're very fluid and their focus is different. Like they're not trying to solve the complex problems of a Scrum team. They're trying to pull work and flow it through their process and improve their process. Here's some of the things you'll notice for metrics that a Kanban board has. So they still have a board, kind of like the Scrum team, but it may be more complex and have a lot more of the columns. And that's because there's different phases that work goes through. They also have lead time and cycle time. So cycle time is how long it takes you to go from an idea to actually shipping something out the door to the customer. Lead time is going like even bigger than that, from like touch point, maybe contract proposal, all the way to them receiving that product. So it goes slightly longer than the actual cycle time. When you look at cumulative flow, that's showing you how work is flowing through your process, and that's always monitored. You're constantly looking to improve the flow of work. So 2 different frameworks, and you'll need to determine what is the best framework for the teams, the Agile teams that you're setting up. Once you've determined that, so now you've got the people, you've decided on your approach, you've decided on the types of teams, now is a great time to pull the people in. Now you're ready to say, hey, would you like to opt in to being on a Scrum team or being on a Kanban team? Here's more about it. Here's the type of commitment you'd be making. Here's the pros, here's the cons, and then giving them that option to opt in. Once they've opted in, now it's all about getting them formed. So a great way to do that is through a team canvas. This is where they set their mission. So they identify what subset of the product they're creating or service. And they talk about the roles on their team, what are their competencies. So that's where you measure, like we showed that little diagram of what skills they like and what skills they don't, what they have, what they don't have. They come together and form working agreements. So especially remote, you need to have a lot of working agreements established so that you can meet your objectives and work together and collaborate and swarm. Working agreements are also a great way to combat bad behaviors in a non-confrontational way. So maybe somebody's constantly late, it becomes a working agreement to be on time, and we're able to say, hey, you're 15 minutes late. That's not how our working agreement goes. Also, they should identify the stakeholders. So who are the customers and the stakeholders that they need to invite to maybe their demos or have included in a lot of the conversation around that product or that process. And so when you fill out this canvas, which is a great canvas to use, this is usually part of a meeting. So it's like a kickoff meeting with the team. It's typically facilitated by a Scrum Master. It could be an Agile coach, and it just gels the team together. This is also where you start talking about the events, the ceremonies, and the schedule. So now you've formed the team, you've launched the team, and before they can get started, you need to identify the cadence in which they're going to be operating. So you'll have to determine maybe some things like setup. Are they all remote? How are you going to make sure that they can facilitate great communication and collaborate together? You need a way to make their work visible. So these are all the things you have to be thinking about when you're ready to lift off a team. Like Scrum, for example, there's 5 different events, and 4 of them require scheduling. So you need to have those put in there. You also need to have a regular point at which you're tying the people in at the team level into the overall product vision, or regular refresh on here's the roadmap and here's where we're driving towards, and you are here and we want to go here, to constantly give them that sense of purpose and the why behind what they're doing. Here's an example of team seating, and I can share a little bit with you about my own personal experience of sitting in a bullpen. First of all, coolest team I've ever worked with. I really enjoyed sitting with them. I was the Scrum Master for that team, really fun and high energy. Some things to think about when COVID's over or whatever the new norm is, and we go back into a building together, if we ever do. I was in a bullpen, and there's some really big drawbacks into asking someone to sit and face each other all day long. I would say that the best situation is separate seating or reserved seating, in which like maybe you have open time, like you can sit in an open room and meet together if you want to. So in this diagram, you have the team home, the zone meeting space where anyone can come in and be flexible and talk to each other. But then you have the individual space where you're not constantly staring at each other. Plus, I mean, some of the things people do, like their music and talking, and it can get in the way of productivity. So the best situation is where you have like you can plug in a laptop in a quiet zone, kind of like the library if you need to, or you have more of an open space like the one on the left for more permanent seating. And then on the right, you have some place where you can have your daily Scrum and meetings like that. So this is a great visual for that. And then remote collaboration, that's our new world right now. So I have a lot to say about that. There are great tools out there. The closer you can get to a whiteboard and people around that whiteboard talking about the way they see the world and how they think they can work through these stories together, the better you're going to be, because you're getting rid of delays and interpretation and the waste around that. So a mural board is like a virtual whiteboard that allows your teams to collaborate together. Miro is very similar to that, same thing. They're allowed to collaborate together. You can do all kinds of things in here. You can do daily Scrum in here. You can do retrospective. It comes with all of these templates. It's affordable. So I recommend either of those tools, and I use those tools when I teach like Scrum Master and Product Owner classes virtually. There's also tools for teams to be successful and track like the reporting, how things are going for the team. Jira is an amazing tool for that. There are a lot of reasons for that. The reporting, a lot of it comes with it. It's already set up, and the tickets are very easy to use. I guess the biggest hurdle I've seen with that is the delay with IT and structuring workflows appropriately. So if you're going to launch a team, you're going to want to select good tools that are easy for them to operate. And if you're going to use Jira, you're going to want to have your workflows determined before you launch the team. Slack is a great way to communicate. It's basically like you can put it on an app on your phone, or you can use it on your desktop. I know a lot of people use like Skype, and they chat their messages through their network. Google Docs is a great way to collaborate, but that depends on if you're working through classified or unclassified. And then of course Confluence, which pairs very nicely with Jira. Great way for you to collaborate on ideas and tools. Okay, so we're entering the last phase of the webinar before I open it up for Q&A. So what is a great Agile team? As a webinar attendee, I want to understand what a great team looks like, so I have a general sense of the desired outcomes of a new team launch. So we want to have a common goal that's driving the team, and we also want the team to need each other. So if they don't have a common goal and they don't need each other, then they're just going to be coworkers. If they have a common goal, but they don't need each other, then they're going to be a pseudo team, meaning they're a team, they meet every day for their daily Scrum, but they don't actually do anything together. If they need each other, but they don't have a common goal, then they may be people who just become natural allies. Like, hey, I need to get something done, and will you be my coworker friend, and I'll give you some documents and you can help me because you're good at that. And then when it's done, we're not going to hang out. That's called a temporary alliance. And then what we're really trying to get to is a team. So we're going to give them a goal. We're going to give them a vision. We're going to help them form a mission. And then we're going to make sure that they need each other to be successful. The values of Agile do a lot to help foster a great Agile team. So focus. Everyone focuses on the work during the sprint or the time box. They have the courage to work through difficult problems. They're open about the challenges that they have. They are personally committed to achieving the goals of the team, and they respect each other as capable, independent people. I love this diagram. We take on work as a team, we deliver as a team, we fail as a team, and we celebrate as a team. That's what we're really driving towards. We want to keep our team stable. So what you see on the left, that's kind of got the little cross through it like X, that's actually when people are snatched from a team frequently. And either this takes the form of like dedication, like, oh, well, you can still be on the Agile team, but you're 10% dedicated now instead of 75% dedicated. What that's really doing is devastating the cohesiveness of that team. And it's also feeding a bunch of distraction in there. It's going to slow that team down. So what we do want is stable teams. And that means that within a 6 to 12 month period, you only have about less than one person being snatched from the team. So small teams, 5 to 7 people. When you're designing the size of your team, 5 to 7, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. And also stable. So more dedicated, the better. And the longer they can stay together, working together, the better. Here is a great diagram for how leaders can support teams as they go through the states of maturity. So in the beginning, it's called the shoe state. That's where they're just following through on the rules. They don't understand it. When they get to the ha state, they understand the rules of maybe Agile or Scrum. And now they're starting to maybe stretch it a little bit here and there to customize it to meet their needs. And then the restate is when they've mastered Agile and they're basically this high performing gelling team. That's extremely attractive because they're very productive. So we have to start with inclusion. The team members, they need to feel like they're included. They need to feel like their opinion matters. So leaders need to help in this phase of it by providing structure, making sure everyone's included. So this is facilitating, opening the discussion. Maybe the second part of this is friction. So you're going to have conflicting views. This is the storming part of forming, norming, storming. Support, coach, train the teams, help solve the conflicts, build trust. And then when we get to performing, we want to be like consultants for them. We want to support the impediments. So now they've formed together, they know how to work together as a team. It becomes all about how can I get problems out of your way so you can be more effective. And then the fourth part is structure. So we want to make sure that we're helping the team share responsibility, rewarding them when they do work together, coaching and facilitating them on an individual level at becoming more T-shaped and developing. So the return on investment. So if you decide you wanted to lift off an Agile team, it's the best investment you can make, especially when you're in a world where you depend on people. You depend on people to make your net present value, your return on investment. Number one reason why is because they'll have a clear purpose. When they have a purpose, they can focus, and that increases the value. And I'll show you a couple diagrams in a minute. If you can help minimize bureaucracy, that's going to help speed up innovation and make that team more stable. If you can keep the team small, between 5 to 7 people, then they're going to really be faster. If you can give them a sense of belonging, autonomy, purpose, then that's going to increase their engagement and they're going to be way more productive than they were before. And then finally, if you have T-shaped people, there's not going to be as many handoffs. And so you're going to have a lot faster delivery. So we want to move from our theory X mindset. So people are lazy, they don't want to do a good job, they need to be managed and controlled, they have very little creativity, to people under the right conditions like to work and they're creative, they take pride in it, they're motivated to set their own goals. That's where we're trying to shift with this idea behind Agile. And so as leaders, we want to move from this state where we say, build a bridge. On the left, we have basically a very strong vision. We need to build a bridge. On the right, we have a very strong vision. We're saying we need to cross the river, but we're saying you can figure out how. So here's the problem, but you get to figure out how. I'm not going to tell you how to build that bridge. And then on the bottom right-hand side, you have leadership completely and fully empowering and trusting the team, but not providing any vision at all. And they're like, oh, hope someone's working on the river problem. No one is, right? And on the far left side, we have absolute chaos, where the teams command and control, but there's no vision and they're just confused as to what are they doing, what's their purpose. So autonomy is trusting with the theory Y mindset, that the teams and the individuals on the teams are motivated to work hard and that they can decide how to work in a creative way within parameters. So it gives them a sense of ownership. The reason I say small teams are better is because of laws like Brooks' Law. which show that communication, the more you add people on, the more complicated it gets to communicate and to arrive at decisions. So if we have a smaller team, then we're actually making it so that they can work more effectively together, communicate better together, and collaborate better together. This is also the reason why throwing bodies at a late project doesn't work, because you're adding a complexity there that means more people have to work harder to communicate and arrive at decisions and action. Decentralized decision making is the reason why Agile teams are successful, because they have the powerful ability to make decisions fast. Because they're empowered, they're trusted, they have the skills necessary to get the job done. That means they can make decisions fast instead of waiting for weeks and weeks and weeks for somebody on a higher level to tell them how they should do something or what they should do. This means that you should take the time ahead of time to decide what types of decisions they are allowed to make. And you can establish parameters around that as you become more comfortable. Another thing that these good teams do, great Agile teams do, is they focus on one thing at a time. And this multiple project and switching time, context switching graph has been shown all over the place, all over the world, but I love it because what it shows is that when you give someone a lot of different things to work on, each time they take on additional tasks, they become less effective at any of the tasks. So we do want to focus on the flow of work, and we want to encourage our team to work together and collaborate together so that they're effective. So we want to focus, and some of the ways that we can do that is by making sure that when people come at our teams, we set parameters around when they're welcome to do that and when they can have those private, like little docking stations where they're left alone. There are also like a lot of good practices teams take on to make that very crisp. We also want to make sure that when we're giving them work, like releases, we're not giving them 3 different competing releases at the same time. What we want them to do is focus on one release, deliver to that release, pull the next release, deliver to that release, pull the next release, and deliver to that release, because you will get faster customer delivery overall, and each individual customer or each individual release will be delivered faster because they're not context switching. And then, okay, so why do we want to do that? Because we're trying to optimize flow and increase customer value. So instead of this fried out person here who feels like they're very flustered with all their papers, we want the happy person who's optimized flow and feels good about their job and the direction of that company. Another thing Agile teams do that are great is that they get feedback. So instead of just giving a pile of documentation to their customer or their stakeholders, they're demonstrating working product and they're soliciting feedback in everything that they do. It requires a lot more communication, richer communication, but the net return on that is much higher. So finally, I hope that you enjoyed this webinar and that you are more familiar now with Agile Crew, which is a team of teams of highly competent business owners like myself who bond together and we work on large contracts together. Like I said, there's a lot of great reasons to do that. There's a QR code here. You're welcome to scan this and feel free to book a free consultation. This is actually a reservation on my calendar, so I'd be happy to talk to you for free. I usually do an hour session, just hang out and ask me questions. I also have given you my email here because if you would like a copy of the slides, I'm super willing to do that. However, the limitations of a LinkedIn event have brought it to the point where I don't know your email address, so you'll have to email me if you want the slides.